My guests here are from the fields of culture, arts, culture, media. So we'll try to give you that perspective in terms of speaking to power. And the second thing is that we will focus we are still in the middle of it, but the post-Gaza genocide context.
In the last years, I was working a lot in the field of cultural politics. It was already depressing, like while I was working with the subject of diversity and let's talk how much diversity. I'm living in Berlin. Berlin used to be the city of art, and the diverse culture of the art is actually what identified Berlin. Cultural institution, we don't give all the time statements on war, so why did you choose to give a statement on Ukraine, for example? When do you decide to talk about something?
Cecilia, I want to move to your own experience. From covering the Middle East for so long, have you had any moments of tension between what you want to say and what you are able to say?
I don't have freedom of expression. We are required to be impartial. Personally, I don't have a problem with this. And I'll tell you how to get around things like this. Doing the human stories from a war zone is very challenging, first of all, because no journalists from outside are let into Gaza. We can go in embedded with the Israeli forces. You can't report impartially, or you can't even report doing that. I have a colleague, a guy who has been a producer and a fixer for Swedish radio for 15 plus years, and he has been doing amazing work. He goes to the hospital. The trucks with corpses come in, and he stands there talking, and he says, I'm so scared when I'm standing here that one of the dead people will be someone I know, or even maybe my children. And once, actually, one of the trucks arrive, and he sees the children of his cousin. And he's talking on recording a voice message while he sees this. Extremely powerful witnesses from Gaza, which I think are the most important. I cannot explicitly accuse Israel of targeting journalists. Implicitly, yes, I can. But what Sami does is he tells me a story. I went to rent a new room because we had to move from the place we had fled to. And when the owner of the building found out that I'm a journalist, he said, no way, I'm not going to rent a place to a journalist. You guys are targets. So this gives a Swedish audience the picture of what is happening to journalists in Gaza.
You work in the context of India, and you work specifically on giving people, sometimes in very, very remote areas of India, the power of digital. Tell me more about that.
One of the things that I have observed in the last few years is that not speaking is also speaking. What power is not saying is a bigger truth, especially in a digital media-enabled system. The second aspect is, there used to be a time when media was working for masses, right? Now mass itself is a media, and that is totally algorithmic to create narrative. And that narrative goes to the people who are on digital media and who are not even on digital media, because they are affected by the people who are on digital media. So you have to figure out that the media, which is actually very large, which is in the hands of the people, how much is that truthful, and how much algorithm intervention is making that truthful or believable or not. The third aspect is we also talk about freedom of expression when you have a medium of expression available to you. In our country, according to the statistics, 52% population do not even have access to the media which will allow them to exercise freedom of expression. In our country, it is called right to information. Because all their rights is behind the digital wall, firewall, or a digital medium or something like that. even if they want to complain, they have to go to a digital media. Even if they want their monthly ration, they need to go to a digital media. So the point that I want to make is that speaking truth to power or freedom of expression, according to me, is a slightly elitist level of exercise of understanding, right? There is a natural condition of deprivation of non-availability of platform or a medium where I can express even my daily requirement is a bigger truth that prevails all over.
You're a generation who had lived under apartheid and then lived post it. So, yeah, share with us your experience of speaking truth to power.
So I think that with the Gaza genocide, we can no longer be talking about human rights and democracy in the ways that we have done before the genocide. I really think that what has happened over the last while, certainly within the cultural space, over the last few decades, cultural themes have come to be determined by global North interests. And we within the global South tend to embrace them because they quite often come with resources attached to them. And because our own governments don't support the arts in the way that we believe they should, when we also speak about the international community, essentially we talk about the global North, right? And the global North are people who really comprise less than 10% of the world's population. Yet we ascribe so much power to them because they do have economic power and political power and cultural power. And if you look at what the champion of white supremacy, which is the USA, if you are asking a younger generation to believe in democracy, why should they, when you can go to the United Nations and 150 countries vote for a ceasefire, 40 kind of abstain because of their cowardice, and one country can use its veto power to basically say, we must continue to support the slaughter of children. And when that democracy basically blackfaces its genocide and co-ops and sends black people to put up their hands at the United Nations Security Council, what it shows for me metaphorically is the way in which white power and white supremacy works today, that we can become co-opted in our own oppression. And I think that that's what we need to confront. And I think that we need to, in this time that we have now, really begin to rethink the world that we want and the cultural policies that we are wanting to have post-genocide. We have to do it with Palestinians.
So if this is the situation that we are in, and it's quite a dim situation, what, in your view, are some of the ways out of this? What's even before the ways out of this, where is the crux of the problem?
There is something called consumer and there is something called citizen, right? We have been growing in the last few generation as a consumer. And now in the digital era, our level of being a consumer is increased. And I feel that we have also become consumer of democracy rather than a producer of democracy. So we want democracy on a platter, but not produce the democracy for which you have to come out, you have to behave like a citizen, you have to ask for your right, you have to decide what is good or bad for you.
In Europe, the anxiety, of course, is being accused of anti-Semitism. The culture war taking a grip on my country, where people are afraid in the foreign ministry to say what they think. All the small bosses in media are extremely anxious. And they stop reporters from doing their job. And then we have the impartiality question. But there are definitions of this. There's no guarantee for being impartial by being criticized from two sides.
Why is it a certain part of the world had the privilege to have democracy? Where did that privilege come from?
Or maybe just to talk a little bit about it in the South African context. When we were struggling during the apartheid era for a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist society, 75% of eligible voters went to vote in the first election in 1994. Ever since, there's been a major decline. Is it the fault of democracy, or is it the fault of the people who inhabit power and failing to deliver on what people's expectations are? 1948, apartheid South Africa, they elect the National Party who comes into power, who initiates the apartheid system. Israel declares itself a state and becomes an apartheid state. The United Nations, that has both Israel and South Africa as members of a 55-member club at that point, mostly white majority countries, what do? They adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At that point, most of the countries who are part of that club are colonizing powers.